Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Nation Watch from wherever you're joining us. It's Sunday, 4th May 2025. We are in an election year. Guyana is in crisis. Politicians are nervous on the government side. Curfew, then cancellation of curfew to facilitate big shows. Lots of things happening in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Police find it impossible to locate a child in a building, but with great ease scour the territory to arrest people for alleged domestic terrorism, which some attorneys believe to be out of place given the provisions of the legislations governing the commission of such crimes. My name is Mervyn Williams. I'm your host, and today we're going to be discussing the Adriana Young tragedy. Before I do, let me just recap on a few things here. In Mabaruma last Sunday, we spoke about an attempt to conduct a cremation in Mabaruma, dangerously close to homes, and on top of a recently excavated surface where victims of cholera were buried years and years ago. Nation Watch, in collaboration with the residents of Mabaruma, made this public. The residents of Mabaruma decided to stand their ground against the bullies of the region, the chairman of that region, and the mayor of the town of Mabaruma. Eventually, the residents prevailed, and the planned cremation was cancelled. A victory for the people of Mabaruma, which exposed the fact that the public health department and the environmental people and agency had no knowledge of the intention to have the forced cremation in Mabaruma in contravention of a number of laws. On Thursday last, 3 people were buried. A man shot and killed his ex-partner, or mother and sister, killing them in a building at ID Road on the Soesdijk-Linden Highway, and shot their brother, who I believe is still hospitalized. Dead are Melanie LaCruz, 26, Suan LaCruz, 16, and Waveney LaCruz, 50, and injured Sion LaCruz, 23. There was no outpouring of grief nationally. There was no representation nationally. There was no ventilated anger for these 3 indigenous women who were murdered by a man who did not value his own life, ingesting poison and taking his own life in the process. Something I believe he should have done even before visiting that home to brutally murder these 3 women. These are indigenous women, indigenous Guyanese women, who resettled out of their home on the Soesdijk-Linden Highway, looking for a better life, and ending tragically the way they did is unforgivable. Another failure of the system, another failure of our society. No voice raised by the minister responsible for Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Amerindian Affairs as they call it now. No voice raised by any of the other political parties. I spoke about this last week. No voice raised by the NGOs that speak for and represent Indigenous peoples that I can recall. No voice raised by any female member of parliament that I can remember. If any of you spoke up, please forgive me, but bring it to my attention before. No voice raised by anyone from the Women and Gender Equity Commission. No statement that I can recall from the Guyana Human Rights Association. No condemnation from Thursday's Ramblers. Nothing, no voice. Is it because these are indigenous peoples that they are treated as insignificant? These are questions Guyanese need to answer going forward. There ought to have been some amount of outrage for three women being murdered at the same time in our country. We're going to be discussing Adriana Young, an 11-year-old girl who suffered similar fate under gruesome circumstances. Our women and our girls are in danger in this country. Our society is failing us, is failing them, and there's much that we can do about it. But before we are in a position to do anything about it, we must first have an understanding of what's happening around us. My guests today are persons who can clear a lot of issues up for us. Mr. Paul Slow, CCH DSM, retired Assistant Commissioner of Police and former chairman of the Police Service Commission. Mr. Slow, I believe, held and perhaps still holds two records. One for the youngest ever commissioner, assistant commissioner of police to be appointed in Guyana, and two, the longest serving assistant commissioner of police in Guyana. Mr. Slow may be able to correct me on those observations. My second guest is Dr. Dexter Todd, an expert in forensic science, an attorney at law, practicing attorney at law in Guyana. He is the deputy director of IDEM UK, which is a body that is accredited universally, um, having to do with forensic science, investigation, presentation, and prosecution of evidence. Gentlemen, welcome to Nation Watch and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Marvin.
Thank you so much for having me as well, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Mr. Slow, some clarity here. You were, I believe, the youngest appointed the assistant commissioner of police. I keep saying commissioner because that's the role that you ought to have occupied for some time, but were denied. Were you the youngest appointed ever, or were you the youngest appointed at that time?
Well, it might very well be at that time. I'm not sure. I've not perused the record to determine if at the time it was appointed, whether I was the youngest ever. But the other part, as the longest serving, I believe you're accurate with that because I served in that rank for over 11 years. Yes.
Having been denied rightful and justified promotion. Dr. Todd, you are, and you have been traveling the world recently, um, dealing with a number of workshops, seminars, making lots of presentation, leading conversations in your particular field of specialty. Give us a small background piece on the work that you have been doing in this area.
Well, thank you so much. Interestingly, I received my training, my practical training. I did my theoretical training over about three years and something ago, and then I traveled to Ghana, where I was trained by some of the best forensic experts in the continent. Now, I being trained as the only Caribbean person at that time, I felt that it was important that I bring the training to Guyana. I brought that training to Guyana, and we have about 17 persons who are trained in Guyana with the basic training in forensic investigations, including police officers, attorneys at law, and we have about two medical doctors who are trained. Um, from that, I was promoted last year to the deputy global president of the association. And since then, we have been embarking on training s- lawyers, prosecutors, judges, magistrates in the area of forensic investigations. And we have just completed one in Cameroon. and that was well attended because we Cameroon demonstrated its support for the importance of this type of knowledge, and so we had, of course, the main provision being made by the Prime Minister of Cameroon, and then we had a number of ministers of government. We had the Minister of State all the way from Nigeria, who flew and spent all 3 days with us, and went back with a number of initiatives in which they will improve not only the police force, but they will improve, and this I'm talking about the investigative arm of the police force there. But of course, they would look at embarking on sending this training throughout the judiciary there. And so I believe Africa has seen the importance of this, and I would hope that we would catch on in Guyana and see the need to have this knowledge shared, because we're seeing the number of missteps, I would call it. I'm sure my senior Mr. Slow will have a harsher word for what we are seeing in terms of investigation in criminal matters in Guyana.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Slow, you have well over 30 years experience in actual policing, and perhaps closer to 40 years in law enforcement um, as a career, even post policing. And so you bring to this conversation a lot of experience. Perhaps you can give us a slight little background there as well.
Well, actually, 37 years as a policeman, 37 years. And after that, I continued in the security environment. And I have maintained an active interest in security, policing, investigations, and all of that. I've been fortunate to be, I'm a graduate of the FBI Academy. I'm also a graduate of the Police Staff College in the United Kingdom. So, yes, I've served in many areas in Guyana, commander of, as it was then, A Division, B Division, D Division, the Tactical Services Unit, Head of Operations, Traffic Chief. So as a Presidential Guard. So I've been around. I've been around the block on a few occasions. So I think I'm qualified to make certain comments as it relates to policing, investigation, and the like.
Excellent. So let's get into this conversation. A child is with her family in a public place. The child is separated from her family at about 1:30. After some time, the police were notified because efforts to find the child proved futile. The police eventually visit that public place at a time when relatives and supporters of the family assembled out of concern for the safety and well being of that 11-year-old girl. The girl is known to be a swimmer, is not known to have been in the pool. The police show up, the family members ask the police for assistance in searching the premises to locate this child. The feedback we got is that persons were denied access to the building, and the police decided to maintain a presence which persons present at the location felt was a posture to protect the building and to protect those who operated from within the building. The police say that the pool was searched in the afternoon. They say the pool was searched in the night. There's video footage available to show that the pool was clear. There was no person or any other object present in the pool, according to the video footage. The deepest part of the pool is 8 feet. The water is clear. The tiles appear to be blue, giving the water the appearance of being blue. You saw in the video clearly there was nothing at the bottom. But by the morning of the next day, while people kept vigil outside, while people prevented vehicles from exiting the premises. On the morning of the following day, the body of 11-year-old Adriana Young was seen floating in the pool with cotton balls stuffed in both nostrils. Mr. Slope, tell us a bit about police response to matters such as these and police response to this particular matter, and help us understand what may have gone wrong in terms of crime scene management.
Well, let me say that everything went wrong in terms of crime scene management because let's understand you have a report of a missing person. This is not a regular missing person report because the regular missing person report, someone will come to say that Mary Smith or Ari or someone was missing and they don't know where they were. They might even give you the information as to where they were last seen, what color clothes they were wearing, a description, a general description. That's a routine regular missing person. This was not a routine regular missing person report because the child was at a particular location at a particular time, and the suspicion at the time of receiving the report, or the suspicion the time the report was being made, is that this child was still on the premises. I say that as a beginning to say, therefore, the routine action that the police would have taken in a regular missing person report could not have, should not have been taken in this matter. It required an immediate galvanizing of resources to search that place. It also required, and I think this is one of the egregious things too, you don't know what has happened to the child. You don't know who is the suspect, if any foul play. So therefore, everyone has to be a suspect at that point. No one should be allowed to leave. No one should, no one should be allowed to enter. No one should be allowed to leave. You have to immediately adopt a posture to make sure that that place is secured. No one is allowed to leave while you mobilize the sword. Because I suspect, let's be fair to the police. I'm trying to be fair to the police. Wherever they said the report was made at Tushan police station, they would not have had the resources there to do a comprehensive search. Let me be fair and understand that. So you have to have those people who would have responded have to be instructed to secure the premises until such time that additional resources from the division are garnered to do a comprehensive search. That was not done. It is clear that that was not done. So that is number one. No proper search. The place was not secured. We understand up to like today, that place is not secured and treated as a crime scene, right? So that is a problem. The action of the police in receiving this report, because again, I suspect that what should have happened is that the commander would have been informed. The message would have gone up the chain. Commander, we have this missing person. Somebody saying that the child is still in the hotel. And the police commander has to then take control of and give directions as to what should happen. He has the authority to gather resources from within the division, and if they are overwhelmed, from outside the division. He relates to his seniors, given the seriousness of this, and they pull resources together to conduct a search in the first place, because that is what it's a missing person. You don't know if a crime has been committed initially, but you have to get into the posture where you are searching this building, and I suspect hotel get as many rooms and so on. So you're going to be searching for this missing person. And again, I say no one should be allowed to leave. Once initially this child was not found, then you have to escalate the process. You have to maintain again that no one leaves that premises. And when you got your resources, you have to go through the process of start getting information of who are the people who are there, where last she was seen, because each and every individual in that premises would have had to be questioned to determine who may have last seen her, where they would have seen her, and the like. And then a red flag too, a red flag as a police investigator, as a senior police command. I want to see the video recording. I want to see the CCTV footage. Oh, the CCTV cameras are not working. That should have aroused suspicion immediately. How do you have a facility like that where all these people are and something has happened and you're saying that the CCTV cameras are not working? Red flag, which should have caused you to be even more suspicious and even more determined to make sure that the proper search was done. So I leave it there for now.
Um, I want to stick with you on a one smaller point here, please, Mr. Slow. The CCTV cameras were not working. However, a subsequent social media expose brought out information suggesting that someone had removed cash from the premises and was caught on camera. This is
Yes,
after the problem started and the fire started.
I saw that. So I suspect what you're saying that it wasn't working at that particular time, but somehow they were able to get it working to discover that theft of. Yeah, so all of that leads to serious questions. And again, I say this all came about because the police did not take the necessary action from the beginning. That is it. That is the issue. I know the sad part of we up to now we do not know what time this child, the time of death. We know from information that the child might have been around there up to about 2 o'clock, I think, or something like that. And then, so you don't know the time of death. And I'm saying, therefore, that all the time the police failed to search when they were responding, the child could have been alive.
Could
And a
very well
proper
have been
action
alive.
by the police, proper action by the police might have led to the discovery of this person alive. So all of these are factors to be taken into consideration.
Which brings me to Dr. Todd's area. Dr. Todd, when this child's body was lifted out of that pool by her father, the video we saw was the video of a child whose body apparently had started to suffer the effects of rigor mortis. She did not look as limp as somebody who was just injured or died. And we saw clearly, not froth, or froth as we say, but cotton balls stuffed in both her nostrils. The body was removed. There was no preservation of the pool area. There was no report of samples of water being taken from the pool. There was no evidence of any gathering of any forensic evidence whatsoever. Help us understand what ought to have been done and how that would have helped investigators in this matter, prosecutors in this matter, um, going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Now, I believe falling back on what Mr. Slow said was important, how the investigators treated the report in the first place. We have gone past that and we've gone to the stage now where you have found a body. Now that body ought to not have been removed by any person but a crime scene investigator. That there that entire scene, all the persons there ought to be allowed not to move, not to remove anything, not to be touching of the body, not to touch the decomposed body, not to do anything. And then photographs ought to be taken immediately of the exact state in which you found the body before it was removed. And I believe that is where you have this contention coming up now of where some are saying there was cotton wool stuck in the nostrils of the child, and then others are saying no, it was frothed, and so you have that discrepancy now, and so who is now going to be able to determine that discrepancy? The police, if they had taken the steps initially in the correct format. Now, if you look throughout the videos, There is absolutely no crime scene rank dressed for a crime scene on that scene. All the videos that you're seeing, there is absolutely no preservation. Now I see, now in the video you see persons are pelting at the building with chairs, all of that. All of that should not have happened because immediately there is a body. So you are looking at one of the crime scenes. Remember, we are not sure if that alone is the crime scene because the crime scene could have started somewhere else. The crime scene could have been several other places which the crime occurred before it got to the pool. So you don't want to disrupt anything now. All those persons that you're seeing on the crime scene, immediately, that should have been curtailed. That should have been curtailed. Those persons should have been allowed to move back. That entire environment should have been cordoned off so that there is preservation, because the thing about forensic investigation is that you have to be able to preserve the crime scene. If you don't preserve the crime scene, you contaminate potential evidence that you can live, potential samples that can be important for determination, having completed forensic tests. So really and truly, this what you're seeing here is a complete, not 90, not 80, 100% complete chaos. And of course, outside of any type of forensic approach. And so immediately I think the police's posture from the onset started and set the platform for there to be a contamination of the entire case and contamination of the entire evidence, because posture was bad. Even if, I mean, clearly, you don't have at that time. I don't predict you had a medical doctor to pronounce the child dead, but common sense will tell you, and from your observations, that you cannot remove that body. What should have happened is immediately there should have been a forensic doctor who would visit at that location, and so that important samples are taken at the scene immediately. So this here, what happened, if you look at developed countries, and even look at some of the countries in Africa, you will never see that posture, because immediately when you're dealing with forensic investigation, you need to, because immediately you have to know who is the head of of the forensic team, who's heading the forensic investigation, who is giving instructions in relation to other members of the forensic team, who are giving instructions to them. You saw none of that. With all the training that is available to the police force, you see absolutely no operationalizing of that training at all. A complete setup for a failed case. That was a complete setup for a failed case.
I like that point because it it reflects the way I see this as a layperson, and it reflects the way many others see it. But putting it together the way you did brings clarity to this. Sorry, Mr. Slow. The police issued a statement. The statement said that there's video evidence of this child entering a motor car, complete with a description of the motor vehicle, make, model, registration number, color, everything. Providing a time by which this child supposedly left this location and this vehicle. The police came back later on to say that that statement contained errors. It appears to me that this erroneous and misleading statement is what is responsible more than anything else for the chaos that erupted at Tushan on that day. Some people believe that it was deliberately misleading in order to get persons to focus their attention on the west bank of the Demerara. Some people believe that it was blatant incompetence by the police. The police, for its part, said that this error occurred. Later on, much later on, days later, the police said that it was a civilian employee in the operations room that was responsible. This civilian employee purportedly inserted the wrong date into the search system and allegedly came up with what he or she came up with. Is it a case of incompetence or is it a case of calculated conduct aiming at cover-up? Mr. Slow, your take.
Yeah, thanks. Let me say this. Let me go back a little to the time the body was discovered, as explained by Dr. Todd. Now, and again, I want to try my best to give the police whatever little leeway might be available. First of all, as we said, they did not secure the place, right? So everybody had access. At the time when this body was seen in the pool, everyone also had access. Now, I don't think we can fault the father for jumping into the pool and removing the body as he did. Can't fault him, right? The emotion kicked in. That is what he had to do. I say, if the police had taken the correct action, that would not have happened. But from the time that body was removed from the pool, the necessary steps should have been taken to ensure that that body remains there. All those persons should have been removed. You put a cordon around there, and you deal. The people from the photographic branch would have been summoned or should have been summoned to come there and to take photographs, close up for our photographs. That is what they're trained to do. And again, if that was done, then you would not have had this question as to whether it was cotton ball or whether it was mucus from the nostrils and all of that. Because I'm sure any competent crime scene photographer would have ensured that all of those things were taken. The discoloration of the skin and all of those things would have been taken. And what is more worrying, perhaps most people are overlooking that. What is more worrying, at that time, when that body was recovered, the divisional commander, Mandel, assistant commissioner, was on the scene, and he failed to take the appropriate action. The divisional commander, the most senior man in the division, was there and did not take action to bring this thing under some type of some semblance of control. Now, to the car. Now, it is my belief, given all that transpired and given the sequence of events, that release about the description of the car, the direction it was heading, and they were positive that it was the girl going into the car. I believe that was deliberately done to get the people away from there. Again, you're taking things in its totality. Because even the following day, we learned that they were telling, oh, the girl is seen someplace, in some bus with some man with nothing, right? So it is not a wanting, and therefore, to try to lay the blame on some civilian. Let's say, again, I want to give them the benefit. A civilian is there, and the civilian might have inputted the wrong date as they are claiming. What checks and balances you have? What type of checks and balances you have in the system to allow for this information to go public without being properly verified? You cannot excuse that. It is if that is the case, it's an old system failure. And again, the powers that be, because don't forget, they're saying that about the divisional control center, but they also said that the control center in Georgetown confirmed the presence of this car at a particular location on the West Bank. So it's not a one statement. It's several statements made by the police, and therefore, I am of the view that this would have been deliberate. That is my view, given the sequence of events. Again, I emphasize the fact that you had the divisional commander there on the morning of Thursday the 25th, I think it was. So something is definitely wrong. And you can see too, because the very Thursday morning, even the Thursday morning, no control, no attempt to control. So people are leaving. I saw 2 Caucasian men with suitcase, and the civilians out there got to turn them back. I saw a vehicle, what we call a canter truck, attempting to leave. Is a civilian had to tell them don't go back. What was the commander doing? What was he doing then? Just standing up as a normal spectator? I mean, it's a total breakdown.
I can tell you that when I arrived, well, not when I arrived, in my presence, the police vehicle, one of these pickup trucks, was heading towards Reading Hope, having exited the premises. And what appeared to be a body caught my attention, lying on the floor of the vehicle. The divisional commander was standing on the roadway. I inquired of a policeman whether it was a body that was being removed by this vehicle, and I received confirmation. So, like you, I was both puzzled and troubled that a motor vehicle, a police service vehicle, was taking away a body, not a horse, and the divisional commander was on the roadway and not at the place where the body was picked up. Um, on the side of forensic evidence, how does that fit, Dr. Todd?
I mean, again, I go back to say, now, the thing about trace evidence is that trace evidence is just what it is. You are able to move evidence from one place to another place to another place. And that is why it is always important when we talk about forensic investigation that persons are always properly dressed, because you are able to bring something to the crime scene which ought not to be there, or which can affect or contaminate the scene, or you're able to take away something vital from the scene to move it to another place, which again brings discrepancies later down. So when we're talking about removal of the body, it is important that a crime scene investigator takes control of that, because the normal way in which you will remove the body will not be the same type. Let's say if someone dies, report that the person died in the hospital, or that the person died under medical observation. It's different how you remove the body. You wrap the body, and then you take the body by way of horse. But when you're dealing with an alleged homicide, it is completely different as to how you package and wrap that body, because what you want to do is immediately preserve anything that you can forensically remove from the body, which will be able to tell you a story. So clothing is important. what you're able to lift. So it is not just wrapping and putting, and then you're talking about what is transporting this body. You can't just wrap the body. I'm
In a
not too sure
sheet.
what in in
In a
in a
sheet.
sheet. Worse, any forensic trained person will tell you that is not how you're going to rob. I can't believe Guyana doesn't have for a scene like this doesn't have a crime scene bag to put the a forensic bag to put the body in. You can't move it cloth. Listen. It is when I was traveling back just the other day. I tell you, and I'm using this as an example. I passed through the UK and I stopped in Birmingham. And just outside of my hotel, someone died. Could be the heat or so. I'm not too sure. I didn't follow up with the case. But let me tell you, no one, including me, was able to come out, to exit out of that hotel. No one was able to come up the road. The entire street was cordoned off, and if and it was just, of course, mind blowing to see how they were lifting the body. The crime scene ranks were dressed from head to toe, dressed with their hazmat suits, shoes covered. You don't go bare feet or go with your bare shoe covered right through, gloves, everything. And how they were wrapping the body. Now, of course, they were medical experts on the ground, on the ground. Because one of the things that you can't do, I mean, yes, we are not trained doctors, so we are not able to pronounce that someone died. Of course, we can use our observation and see and form a particular opinion that is safe. But I can tell you, one of the important steps that you need to use immediately is to revive. If you can't revive, you have to go to the second stage. Contain. You have to contain. So when you are containing now, and under contain, you have all elements in terms of preservation, etc. You have to contain every single thing on that body that can potentially be lifted to be able to give you a particular story as to what really happened. So just wrapping up the body and putting the body in a vehicle and then just moving that vehicle, and then each step that you take must be documented. So from the time you pick up the body, it has to be documented. From the time the body is wrapped, it has to be documented. And when I'm talking about documented, I'm not talking about writing, I'm talking about photographing of each and every step. And the person who is doing that, from the time the person goes into the rut and goes into a vehicle, that is also documented. Because that helps you when you are beginning to do your forensic analysis in terms of your preservation to make sure that there has been no contamination and there has been no misstep that can lead to a false conclusion at the end of a forensic investigation.
Mr. Slow, video evidence on social media showed us, the citizens of this country and this world, that a serving policeman was seen with trousers wet from the knees down, following the discovery of the body. Video footage showed us the same serving policeman standing on a stairway. Behind him, smoke started to billow out of the building from behind and above him. A serving policeman was standing there. There was pandemonium at the poolside where the body was lying. There was smoke billowing from behind him, and he stood there, a serving policeman. And coming out of that and all that we've discussed so far, we heard that three police ranks were placed under close arrest. We learned from no less a person than the president himself that the divisional commander was transferred and then sent on administrative leave. To this day, we do not know the identity of the three ranks who were under close arrest. We don't know if they're still under close arrest. And we don't know what departmental or other breaches they are alleged to have committed, resulting in them being placed under close arrest. Talk to us, Mr. Slow, about this particular set of events.
Yes, let me say this. I saw the video because I suspect almost every single Guyanese with a phone or access to the internet would have seen the video or some of those videos that you referenced. Not only was this person, I don't know the person, they claim that he's a policeman, so I defer to that, standing on the veranda. And I think what you failed to mention is that the video first showed that he went into the very room.
Yes.
And at the time when he went there, there was no evidence of any smoke or any fire. But shortly after he exited,
but he was on his knees by some bedside or the other. So
smoke started to billow from that particular room. And then he was so casual as he came and he came down the steps and all this. It leads to a lot of suspicion. It leads to a lot of suspicion. And then the release that 3 persons were placed under close arrest. Up to now, they have not said who those persons were, which again leads to a lot of suspicion. Then I saw over the past 2 days a report which says that 2 men were relieved of duty, 2 policemen were relieved from their duty, and people conclude, based on the comments, that means they were dismissed. I am not too sure about that. The word dismissed was never used. They say they were relieved. That can mean a lot of things. And I know my friend, Dr. Todd, will, as a lawyer, will be very interested in the language used. They never said they were dismissed. They were relieved of their duty, and they said for neglect. And I pointed out that if it is they are accused of being neglectful, then there is a legal process to be gone through. There is a Police Discipline Act, Chapter 17:01, and I know it very well because I taught it and I lectured and I do all of it. I practice it. Section 4E1 of the Police Discipline Act, Chapter 17:1, says that if you fail to do anything which is your duty as a member of the force to do, that is a neglect. So, and then there's a process. You have to go through a process and have these people face some type of disciplinary trial if it is a dismissal. So I caution all those who are jumping to say, oh, they read the thing. I think it was in Kaicho News and elsewhere. Policemen relieved of their duty, and they say, well, they said dismissed. But the statement from the police, which I have with me, said that they were relieved of their duty. And we have not heard anything more. Why were they relieved of their duty? What were they accused of? The thing said neglect. What neglect? You can't just say neglect. You got to say in that you failed to do a particular act that you are required to do as your duty. So I am cautioning that when you see these words, and that is why we come and speaking out, and we analyze and we read between the lines. So up to now, we have not heard who these people are. They said 3, and then they spoke about 2 being relieved from duty. What happened to the next man? No one, they're not telling us. I see this is part of the problem in this whole thing. Up to today, like today, we had the Linden incident. We had this issue with this young girl. The man in charge of the force, the commissioner of police, has not said a single word. The crime chief has not faced the media to offer any explanation or to say anything about this investigation. And we can recall that the president, the president, I think it was on the night of Thursday or sometime then, he said, and I'm quoting him here, as carried in one of the dailies, I have asked the commissioner of police to assemble a special team to lead the investigation into all the circumstances surrounding 11-year-old Adriana Young. We must uncover the full truth of everything that transpired, and no resource or effort will be spared in doing so. And that's part of the quotation. A special team, he said, he ordered the commission to assemble. Up to now, we have more than anything further on that. We have not. So you have to, when people are suspicious and make statements that they don't have confidence in the police, it's because of all of these things. The commissioner of police has not said a single word. The crime chief has not said a single word. The divisional commander, well, they will say that he was really not a single word. To face people and to say exactly what happened, why it happened, and what we intend to do. Nothing. So speculations run wild all over the place. And they are to be blamed for that. And you know, a thing that we should point out, lest we forget it, that the lack of information or the giving of false information is not an isolated incident. It is not confined to the Adriana Young's death. They have been doing so for some time, and I've been calling it out. And it leads to the situation, the position now where people lack confidence in the police. People, when a release is given, people don't believe what they're saying because people see that these people are lying. You have incidents they report on. They give a particular narrative. Shortly after, video evidence come to light to contradict what they're saying. So the credibility gone. The same killing in Linden, the policemen were all dressed in uniform when they went to apprehend that tap. And the very night, the video surfaced with the sergeant coming out in a white t-shirt. That is not, they want to call that uniform, but that's not uniform. A white, and I'm saying because of these frequent statements, lying statements, as you would say, whenever, and I suspect that at some time they're going to come with something which is factual and truthful, but because of their reputation, no one will tend to believe, and therein lies the major problem.
Well, you know, there's a very unfortunate comment that just popped up where somebody named Karaya is asking us to stop discussing this little angel and let her soul rest in peace. Well, you know, Pamela Correa may not be a mother, and Pamela Correa may not be a resident of this cooperative Republic of Guyana, because this is bigger than Adriana. This is a classic case of a failed society, where the society has failed and continues to fail our children and our women, and where the police force, politicized as it is, continues to fail the citizens of this country. And that, Pamela Correa, is the big issue. But there's a bigger issue than that as well. The issue of an incompetent regime that has deliberately politicized the Guyana police force, that has deliberately done things to make the lives of citizens untenable in this country, that deliberately enriches the 1% and suffers the majority, that discriminates against the citizens of this country along ethnic and political lines, that suppresses, persecutes, and prosecutes people that they perceive to be opponents of the government or the governing party, the People's Progressive Party. That, Pamela Correa, is the problem in this country. And it is bigger than you. It is bigger than me. It is bigger than all of us. And this tragedy involving this little child has brought to the fore all of those issues that affect us as a nation, Pamela Correa. We have another problem in this whole situation here. But before I get there, let me just make the point, Mr. Slow, that there's a bit of a contradiction in the article that you just quoted from, attributing a certain position to the president of this country about identifying a special investigative team and so on. Why do I say there's a contradiction? And Pamela Correa, you've stirred me up just a little bit. I may be indebted to you. The president of this country has the distinction of holding a number of very, very powerful offices: head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of this country. There's nobody bigger than the president in this country. There's nobody that you can go to as a referee if you're offended by the president, or if you feel the president has taken a particular decision. I suppose with the exception of the Supreme Court. It was Mr. Ali who, following the autopsy, and I want to get to the autopsy, because there's a very, very serious point to be raised. In fact, there are many serious points to be raised, two in particular. Well, Mr. Ali said to this nation that the autopsy said that the cause of death was drowning. Didn't stop there. He didn't stop there. He went on to discuss the manner of death, which the autopsy never touched. He said that the autopsy said that there was no forced drowning. Attorney Darren Wade contradicted that pronouncement by the president. In essence, what the president was saying is that there was no murder. He concluded, if you listen to what he says, you will come to the position that this was a classic case of someone falling in a pool and drowning, and that's the end of the story. But is that even possible, given the condition of the body of that child, the fact that the pool was empty since the day before, the night before, and the morning before it was discovered, the body was discovered? The president, unfortunately, by saying what he said, gave this citizen the impression that he has come to some conclusions. And I would love for the president to tell all of Guyana what it is he premises his conclusion on. But we'll get there. Dr. Todd, this one here, you'll have to help us with. Dr. Glenn Rudner, MD, was advertised as the person coming to do, as one of the team of 3 doctors coming to do this autopsy. The one whose picture was publicized, we will show you it on screen. So when Dr. Glenn Rudner, MD, was introduced to the people of this country by way of media, can we get the picture of Dr. Rudner up on the screen, please? The first Dr. Rudner. No, the first one. That's the last one. The first one is a very youthful-looking Caucasian gentleman, very clean-cut and well presented. So this gentleman's picture appeared beside a picture of young Adriana as the pathologist, one of 3 coming to Guyana. But there's another aged Dr. Glenn Rudner that features. We haven't seen him here locally. This gentleman is also from New York, as the first gentleman we showed you. But when the actual autopsy was going to be done, a different Dr. Glenn Rudner MD from New York appeared. This gentleman. My question is, how can we be assured to any degree whatsoever that the Dr. Glenn Rudner, who was identified as the pathologist to come to Guyana, is the Dr. Glenn Rudner who actually came? Dr. Todd.
That is some concern. Actually, this was brought to my attention only yesterday, and persons even in the diaspora were calling me and sending me um, this what they consider to be very alarming. And I would say the only thing I would say, I am not sure. I don't personally know the doctor, but I would say that it requires a little investigation, because if in fact we're dealing with a case of impersonation here, it even escalates this matter even further. Now I can tell you, we can have several persons carrying the same name.
Oh, yes.
The world is such that happens. Um, but I would want to think. I believe that this was one of the pathologists who was recommended by the lawyer and the family of the deceased. And so I think maybe some further conversations must be had to determine which one of the persons they really intended, and whether we have whether we are dealing with a situation whether the person that they intended to be the pathologist or one of the pathologists who would have conducted the investigations, whether we're dealing with a situation that they got someone else. So it raises some concerns, and I can tell you internationally, because even from some of the forensic pathologists who are watching on from the continent of Africa, they too are asking. I saw a number of messages even last night. They're asking, are you sure this is the real pathologist you got in Guyana? But of course, I was not a part, and I was not aware of who really they were looking for. But I can tell you safely that it raises some concern and it requires some form of clarifications.
But Dr. Todd, again, purely as a layperson looking on, this gentleman looked extremely uncomfortable in all of the video footage I've seen him. He looked extremely scared. I don't know if the crowd got to him. I don't know if he has anxiety issues, but he looked very frightened. And even when footage of him leaving at the international airport at Timeri, he looked extremely uncomfortable. And therefore, all the suspicion surrounding whether or not the correct Dr. Glenn Rudner came to Guyana, um, the, the
It
questions need to be answered.
Yes, it does raise some concerns, which I hope will be clarified in short time, because that I believe can lead to some serious discomfort in terms of how we accept. I did make a Facebook post uh, on the issue of a foot pathologist, and I did say that there is something called ethics in forensic science, and which one of the benchmark foundation of that ethics is that once the science is correctly applied, the results must be the same if you have 40 specialists or experts conducting the same tests. And so because it is always the method, the method and the application always ought to be what is internationally recognized and accepted. So there were no fears in relation to what the outcomes can be. But that changes the position. If you are dealing with someone who came into Guyana who was not a person that was actually recommended, or the person that the family said they felt comfortable with, it raises some concern in relation to that entire process. And I hope that we will have some answers in relation to that.
Mr. Slow, we're going to lean on you heavily here again. I have had experience with an autopsy before. And from my experience, I learned that a member, single member, sole member of the family, solitary member of the family, sorry, is required to witness the autopsy. The police is required to be present. I learned that generally it is a relative, a police officer, the pathologist, and his assistant or assistants. In this case, we learned that there were more than 20 government or state entities represented in this room. I gather that there were no less than 24 persons in the room who had absolutely nothing to do with the process. I learned that a number of them had cameras rolling and they came from different state agencies. Is this government overreach? Is it a case where because the actors were from state agencies that the police could not have maintained some level of um, order or proper management of that room in which this process was taking place? Is it usual for such a large number of persons to be in that room while this process is ongoing?
How let me tell you what my experience is when you deal with post-mortem or autopsies. A relative is there to identify the body.
Identify the body. Yeah.
Let's understand it clearly, not to witness the process. A relative goes there and identifies the body. This is John Jones. And then that relative leaves from that immediate vicinity.
In my
And
case, I did just that. I
right,
could stumble
right,
watching, even though I was
right.
invited to
So,
if I wanted. Yeah.
well, if we had all of these people in as they're claiming, that is totally irregular. Totally irregular. The police is going to be there to witness the postmortem, and when we dealing with, and Dr. Todd will support me here, because you want the nexus. This is the policeman who is the investigator. In many cases, you would have had a conversation with the pathologist, that's the policeman, to tell him the circumstances under which the body was found, what theory you might be investigating, and all of that. You have that conversation with the pathologist, and then the pathologist does his work, his or her work. And at the end of that process, a report is given, right? And the police will then work, because it doesn't end there. Because again, if it's a homicide, then that policeman who witnessed the well, not only homicide, even causing death by dangerous driving, right? He has to be there at the burial. He has to be there at the burial. So because when time comes for him to go to court, that evidence has to be given. He witnessed the postmortem. This is the result of the postmortem. He also witnessed the burial, and he marked the place by its location. All of these are formalities, right, that are required. If therefore they add these number of persons there, government people in particular, it is highly irregular, and it should not have been allowed to take place. Highly irregular.
Dr. Todd, let's talk about the evidence, its preservation, its value to an investigation against the backdrop of overpopulation, for want of a better expression, of the room in which the autopsy was being conducted. The whole question of evidential compromise, the question of, and there's another issue. There's another issue. But let's talk about this before we get to that. Let's stop here, Dr. Todd. The whole question
Well,
of the what happened in that room.
now, one might want to argue that because of the publicity of this particular matter, various powers to be, or various persons or entities, were there to be able to observe and supervise. I mean, if you go back to argue how many cases do we have in Guyana where you have three pathologists conducting or observing the autopsy. I do hold the position that I find that it was a this whole thing was a disrespect to Dr. Neil Singh. I must say, I hold no brief for him, but I can tell you, I have not found any case in Guyana in which Dr. Neil Singh's results have been compromised. Has always acted with great integrity. But let's put that aside.
And he has more than 1,000 autopsies
Of
behind him.
course, I don't understand why is this big rush, because I think Dr. Neil Singh's presence alone could have been enough to satisfy and not have all these other great numbers. But that's not my position or my opportunity to really dissect that at all. But the issue is here is how were those persons dressed? That's one issue, because there are particular gears that you have to wear in the autopsies room that you can't just allow your hair must be covered, because there are so many things. This is a forensic examination. This autopsy is a forensic one. It's not the normal for thing. But it was surprising that the persons were not properly geared up who were there. Now, I can tell you, the police investigator, let's say that there is someone there who is videoing the entire exercise. But to have this number of persons with taking, I mean, this is not, it's, again, it's also insensitive, very insensitive, because you are dissecting a body in a forensic way, which is very detailed. All right. So I have some concerns in relation to how the reports have been made in relation to how that entire room was controlled. Control is very, 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 very important. But then let me not jump you in relation to where you're getting in terms of findings, because that even brings a lot more concern in relation to how we interpreted that in this investigative process.
Right. And I'm going to come right back at you, Dr. Todd, in 2 minutes. Mr. Slow, an autopsy was being conducted in a crowded room. In that room were at least 20 people who did not belong there. Some had cameras, the media was excluded. Medical professionals were working under that kind of pressure in the room, while outside there was a war zone with bullets being fired left, right, and center. And it appeared as though that was engineered. Why do I say that? I say that because the information coming to Nation Watch is that a security officer, a male security person from the hospital, punched a woman in the face at the hospital gate. And when her young son approached him to find out why he did that, he punched the son as well, allegedly. That resulted in persons trying to reach through the gate to apprehend this person who assaulted these two people. The report I received is that the woman was trying to gain access to the hospital for medical reasons. It is unimaginable that a man would just look at a woman and punch her. It seems to me as though there was intent to create chaos. This is my layman's perspective on the matter. That having occurred, tensions rose. People didn't understand what was going on. The police immediately sprang into action, and there was gunshot, rubber bullets being fired, and people suffering injury, including a 10-day worker who was participating in the exercise. How effective, how reliable in those circumstances could the outcome of an autopsy be, Mr. Slow, with pressure in the room and a war zone outside?
Let me address the pressure in the room, because if we have three, and I must remember, these pathologists, as far as I am aware, are foreign pathologists. They are not Guyanese. They're not familiar, I think, with the Guyanese culture. And therefore, if you have that number of persons in the room there, that might be intimidatory. Who knows? They might have been intimidated by the presence of all of those persons. Again, I made the point before. I don't know the pathologists. I'm not going to question the integrity of those people. But what I'm analyzing is the sequence of events. Outside, I followed this thing from very early. Early in the morning, someone called me and in a jocular way said, look, like they got a war zone outside Dr. Balwant Singh Hospital because the entire police force was there. That's what the person told me. And then I realized that they was to do, the beginning of this process was to start at the Balwant Singh Hospital. So I started to follow thereafter. Even to when they removed the body from there, they took the body to the mortuary. All of that was live on social media. And if we look carefully, we'll see there was hardly any crowd at that time. There were some people who I suggest many of them were curious onlookers. And they were there. People attempted to get into the hospital compound. They were being prevented. And the security guard, I overheard that from one of the journalists there, were telling them that only state media personnel were to be allowed into the compound. That caused some concern. And then later on, the others, and I saw someone who I think is some senior functionary at the GPHC came out and said, well, look, that was never the instructions. They never gave any instructions for only state media people to get in there. So the journalists were allowed to go in. And people kept gathering. And no attempt to control that environment, absolutely none. Even when the police arrived, the police formed a line across Middle Street, which is just south of that facility, and they never stopped people from passing. So the journalists, even the journalists were remarking, why are they allowing people to pass freely there? So there was absolutely no control. You couldn't discern any police officer who was in charge of that process. We saw Deputy Commissioner McBean, but he was clearly not related to what was going on out there in terms of control. He had other duties to perform, which he was doing. So there was no control, absolutely no control. And then, to make matters worse, suddenly shots started to fire indiscriminately. And I say that without any fear of contradiction.
Oh, yes.
I spent my first 19 years in the force of the TSU. I taught people crowd control, policemen, what we call riot drill or civil assault, and it's never ever the protocol to fire indiscriminately. If it comes to the point of firing, it is deliberate. The person to fire is identified, and instructions are given. And even before you get to that, there is a process. You know, it's a process where you have got to make sure that perhaps you warn the people them to leave. I never saw any warning, no bullhorn, nothing at all to tell the people disperse. It the law requires, and this is the Criminal Law Offences Act, I think it's from 306 to 309, deal with riots and unlawful assemblies, that if it is that these people are behaving riotous, it requires you to read the riot proclamation.
Yes.
It requires you to read the riot proclamation. And you know, I learned the riot proclamation because I thought that, and all officers, I mean, the law says that if there's a riot or anything like that, then the mayor of the town or a justice of the peace, and that is why police officers, gazetted officers, are made justices. That's one of the reasons, justices of the peace. So you can go and read the riot proclamation, which says, His Excellency the President charges and commands all persons being assembled immediately to disperse themselves and peaceably to depart to their habitation or lawful business, upon the pain of being guilty of an offense for which you may be sentenced to imprisonment. That is the gist of the proclamation. Now, the law further says that you have a responsibility to remove once the proclamation is read or prevent it from being made. The law allows anyone in that area to remain up to 15 minutes. You must disperse within 15 minutes of the proclamation being read. But what we had there, no warning for people to move, no proclamation being read. We even go so far to say there's normally a banner which is raised high in the air so people can see the day to tell them if you don't disperse, we are going to fire. All of those are stages before you go into fire. But you saw none of that. And perhaps the most egregious part is that when those people crowded the hospital compound, I saw people from the TSU or people dressed in TSU uniform turned up there and start shooting at people in the compound. Policemen who were there messaged me to say that they had to run for their life because they're there working, and the police just turned up and start shooting indiscriminately. It was total lack of control, and all of this, you couldn't tell who was in charge. There was no evidence that somebody was in charge and taking control of these people. I heard that even the people on the ground weren't aware what was the policemen I'm referring to. These men were sent from police headquarters to clear the place. So they just turned up and they start shooting indiscriminately, Wild West. That is never, ever the process. You never, ever fire multiple shots. If it's pellets, if it's rubber bullets, they don't fire multiple. The protocol is the officer in charge will identify one of the persons to shoot and say one wrong fire. Because the intention is to disperse. The intention is to disperse the crowd, not to injure or maim or kill, disfigure or kill people. But you saw none of that. And I am saying again, as I have said repeatedly in the past, the blame lies squarely on the shoulders of the man who's in charge of the force. That's the Commissioner of Police. And let me say that before I give up the mic, so to speak. I predicted, and I made the point to some colleagues, I say, no, they're mishandling this thing because they ought to have anticipated that if a result of the postmortem examination did not, let's say, accord with what the people believe, especially they said, Drongden, you're likely to have a reaction. And I told my colleague, I said, look, what they got to do is make sure that the doctors, right, relate to the media that the fact that they said that drowning is the cause of death, that is not the end of it. It might still be a homicide, and that may have quiet people down, because what happened, in my view, is that because you said drowning, people believe they're saying that she drowned in the pool. Because even if it's drowning, where did she drown? And these things weren't explained. It's what happened there on last week Wednesday, last week Thursday, and then Monday the postmortem is a classic example of how it should not be done. That is a classic how it should not be. That is everything. There's nothing that I can see in this whole thing that was correctly handled, not only by the police, but I would have thought the people of the Ministry of Health, in relation to the same release of the autopsy finding, that they would have had a role in it. But long after now, today, the Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony, come out and now talking about the food. I mean, it's disingenuous. They did not do what they were supposed to do, and they have to share a lot of the blame for the mayhem that took place.
But let's go to the expert, the ultimate, absolute expert. We go to a video clip here now. I believe we're borrowing this from News 9, News 9 News Break. Let's.
Signs of physical and sexual trauma. He said that due to decomposition, the pathologists were unable to determine the exact time of death.
Relatives were also informed that the pathologist ruled out theories of forcible drowning or any other means of killing, followed by disposal of the body in water.
Thank you.
Intend to.
That's the expert. The expert has decided that there was no forcible drowning or other means of killing and disposal of body in the pool. This is what I was talking about, Mr. Slow, when you mentioned that, when you read from that news report about the president identifying a special team of investigators. Well, that team of investigators had not yet been named when the president decided what the end of the matter was. From the evidence side, Dr. Todd, Mr. Slow just made the point that drowning as a cause of death does not mean at a particular place or in a particular manner. It simply means this is the cause. And you had publicly spoken to this very issue in a 2 or 3 sentence post that you did on social media as well. The president has spoken on this matter. The full autopsy report has never been seen by any journalist in this country. I conclude that because there's no publication of any evidence to that effect. But the president has pronounced. How does this prejudice or not prejudice the outcome of an investigation when in fact we know that samples have been lifted from the body and perhaps other places and sent for analysis? How does the president's intervention, as we'll perhaps look at again before you answer, impact this case? Can we just look at that and maybe just a little bit more of it before Dr. Todd responds?
Theories of forcible drowning were also informed that the pathologist ruled out theories of forcible drowning or any other means of killing, followed by disposal of the body in water.
Dr. Todd, your take.
All right. So I think you mean the intention is to talk about forced drowning. Now, my understanding, and I think the pathologists were very careful in identifying that these were preliminary results, and the completed exercise or the autopsy had not been our final report had not been handed over to the relevant authorities, and therefore it would have been quite premature to suggest that we're not dealing with a case of forced drowning. Now, when we're dealing with the cause of death, medically or forensically, we don't say drowning. We say asphyxia. And this was of course led by drowning, because you're looking at where the airways, the person's clearly is not able to breathe, and of course so. And I go back to what Mrs. Slow said. Where really did the drowning occur? Was this girl, she drowned in the pool? Did this incident happen somewhere else, and was her body brought and moved to the pool? Now, these are all areas that an investigator is going to need to clear up. And that's why that leads us to what is called the manner of death. You couldn't, even if you did not see signs, and I don't want to bore you a bit with various signs that you will see in terms of the positioning of the body, and one of the notable exercises that the forensic pathologists, when dealing with drowning, is definitely going to examine a lot the fingers, because we tend to use our hands a lot in terms of if someone is fighting, either where you can see signs of struggle. I mean, forensically, signs of struggle is always sometimes seen through examination of one's finger, nails, and so forth. Now, a person could be, and these are all possibilities that an investigator will always have to consider. Any careful investigator does not narrow your investigation. Your investigation is quite wide, and as you find enough information and facts to either eradicate a particular theory and draw closer to another theory, that is done. So it is possible for a person to be unconscious before reaching the stage of suffocation. All right. So you can have a situation that the where you're looking at drowning in this case, where a person was pressed into some water or was put into some water, and clearly the person could not have been conscious at that stage. And at the time when they regain consciousness, you will look for various signs to see if the person would have been fighting. But let's say for a situation where, let's say in a case where the person's hands and legs, etc., have been restrained, then the signs that you will see in terms of whether you're looking for forced drowning, the signs that you will look for, you will not find. And I can tell you that is why this particular examination of forensic examination, or when you're dealing with drowning, has been very debatable, because it is not cast in stones that you will find certain signs on the person's body to indicate that there was forced drowning, because you cannot find certain marks, but yet still it could be forced drowning. So it depends on really the situation. Um, that is why you go to the stage of toxicology. Um, that's why you go to stages of having dictum testes and so forth, because that will you have to now go back to the science to be able to have certain tests done by the expert that will be able to allow you to say whether the person died by drowning accidentally, or we're dealing with a homicide. So in a nutshell, what you have from the pathologist examination, it was too early to rule out whether you're still dealing with a case of a homicide. It is too early. So you'll have to wait until all those tests have returned, and then you will be able to make a certain pronouncement. But at this stage, it's quite early. So to say that we're not dealing with the case, or it was ruled out, a pathologist cannot rule out forced drowning by just a physical, because what you had there is a physical examination of the body. You had not had lab test results attached to that. So the only thing in this autopsy that you had is really they scanned the body to to ensure that there were no broken bones, and then they did a physical test. No person can look at a physical body. Now, discoloration, let's say when you're doing the dissection and you take out certain organs, now the discoloration of it, because of experience of a pathologist, he might suggest to you what likely you're looking at. But I may tell you, and I stand to defend this to the end. You will not be able to say what is in the blood of someone without the right tests. And so to pronounce that we're not dealing with a stage of forced drowning was quite premature, very premature.
Well, Mr. Ali
Let,
came
let, let me
over.
let me let me just add. Let me just add there before Marvin, before you
Sure.
continue. The
Sure.
point is, as far as I know, as far the doctors never made such a pronouncement. So the president is saying that they concluded that there was no forced drowning, but as far as we are aware, that the doctors never said so. They said cause of death drowning, and they didn't go any further.
Except to say that samples are being sent for
Right,
further
right, right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
examination and so on. So the president comes over like an expert. He has pronounced on the matter. He has ruled out homicide. And he appears to be defending something. I don't know if the something he appears to be defending is his own candidacy. Because this whole saga, the issue at Linden, the public disorder that followed both incidents, including police discharging rubber bullets, one of which hit a Lindener in the eye while he was in his yard. And he's now facing potential blindness in the one eye. All of these things seem to be conspiring to bring Mr. Ali and his entire PPP government down, and therefore he seems to be defending his own candidacy at the upcoming elections. He's defending this thing as though he has some interest, and the only interest I could conclude that he may have is his own electability. But all of this has given rise, Mr. Slow, to talk about a second autopsy. And we're winding down here. We've been going for a while. But there's now talk about a second autopsy. The attorney for the family, Darren Wade, has indicated the likelihood of moving to the court should the Guyana Medical Council not accredit the identified pathologist to conduct the second autopsy, which suggests that the questions about whether we had the right Dr. Glenn Rudner, whether the pressures in the room affected the outcome, whether the war zone outside of the hospital contributed to defective outcome, whether the president's intervention and utterings regarding this matter are believed to have compromised in some way or prejudiced in some way what is going on. There is talk about the second autopsy. And there's a very interesting development that accompanies this talk. Dr. Frank Anthony, appearing alongside the president, poured cold water on it, talking about the body being handed over to the family and not being managed in a certain way could potentially be a negative for second autopsy. But we have been hearing before that the body having been removed from the pool under all these different questionable sets of circumstances, we have learned that the storage at the funeral parlor may not have been the best either. And so now Dr. Anthony seems to have taken the position that he's going to defend the People's Progressive Party administration against the possible second autopsy. One former, I believe, is it former? Attorney at law James Bond has come out in support of the People's Progressive Party. He has said a number of things about a second autopsy. He's talked about money being a part of justice. And Mr. Ramkaran wrote, I believe it's today, on the subject of a second autopsy. And it seems to me as though there is a mustering going on here, Mr. Slow, around the People's Progressive Party as relatives and the attorney for the family talk about a second autopsy.
Well, you know, if you really want to get to the bottom of this whole matter, and I suspect many people do not want to get to the truth. The fact that the postmortem said cause of death is wrongdoing, I think that they rejoice over that, because they would not have wanted to hear anything else. So they are now hoping that this thing will close as it is. If it is the desire of the family to have a second autopsy, that should be it. All the time, I know you go to a doctor makes a pronouncement, you get a second opinion. So I don't know what would be wrong with them getting a second opinion. And again, to bring closure, to allay all fears and so on. The process should be as elaborate as it should be, to make sure that at the end of the day, a lot of the skeptics are satisfied that the proper process was gone through. Let me say this. No matter what you do, no matter how many autopsies you have, there are going to be a section of the population that is never going to be satisfied. All because of what transpired before, the way the police dealt with this and all of that. They're going to always be suspicious. Going back to the statement made by the president, I said this on another program, I think it was yesterday, that a vacuum was created where you have the commissioner of police, the crime chief, they have remained silent. Because any pronouncement about investigation, any pronouncement of that sort should have been made by the commissioner, the crime chief, not the president. The president inserts himself into this thing, and therefore it clouds, and they're the ones who say, oh, this thing should not be political. The mere fact that the president is commenting on the cause of death and so on, instead of the commissioner, instead of the crime chief, instead of the pathologist, even instead of the minister of health, he has made it political. And don't forget, you know, we talk about the president saying that. Don't forget, previous to that, the vice president said that this is murder. The vice president said on one of his programs that it is murder. That's before the postmortem. So you have all these experts who can pronounce on whether it's murder or not murder, and now the president comes to make another pronouncement. All they're doing is casting more doubt on the entire process. That is all that they're doing, because all they're seeing is politics. All they are seeing is politics. And let me understand this. This thing is wider than Adriana Young. You see people all across. I saw something today naming some of the countries where they have had protests, countries and cities all around. People who do not even know the girl, people do not even know the family, because the circumstances surrounding her death and the clear attempt to cover up and collude and all that by the police has given cause of concern. And some people talking about collusion, I take it a stage further, because I am saying that given what happened there and the fact that the police would have issued a statement to try to deflect and to try to create some type of other impression, I say it might even get to the stage of them being, one or more of them being accessory after the fact of murder. Because the law says that if you try to cover up, or if you try to, you're an accessory, you're not just negligent, you're an accessory to a crime. So I would wish, and that is why we say, if they really want to get to the bottom of this, let's bring in international investigators, because I do not believe that the police force, the Ghana police force, has the competency to properly investigate this matter. And let me say too, they like to default to the RSS. The RSS does not do as.
You sure you have all the letters there?
Well, sometimes a vowel drops off. Sometimes a vowel is dropped off intentionally. But if you want to get to the bottom, then bring credible people. I read something this morning where there's some group of persons, some organization willing to pay for the FBI or the Royal Mounties or Scotland Yard to come and do a proper investigation. They're willing to foot the bill, and that should not be, because we have all these resources. The president said that he's going to spare no resource to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. If you want that, then ask the FBI to come and conduct the investigation. But even then, it's likely to present a challenge, all because the police did not do, the Ghana police did not, they never, up to now, they have not preserved the scene where this body was found. And the scene where the body was found should have been a crime scene. People are saying, well, you had fire, and not at all. A proper forensic examination, even after the destruction, can very well find evidence linking one or more individuals to this crime. And let me say this before I come up in. Interestingly, a lot of people have perhaps not picked up on this. The police in the latest update, they told us that they have sent samples of the body. They have collected DNA sample, DNA examination of the owner of the hotel and the body. So what are they now investigating? Where you need DNA to determine something can be the identity of the victim, because that is well known beyond a doubt. So why have you collected samples from the body and samples from the owner of the hotel, which they said they were sending to Mount Sinai in New York for examination? That is a mystery to me. I don't know, because I've said you can't be that you want to identify the body. Sometimes you find a body in an advanced state of decomposition. You will need, or if the body is born beyond recognition, you might have DNA tests to determine who the person was. In this case, that is not so. So why have you taken samples to be examined? Samples from the body, sample from the hotel owner. That leaves there are more questions than
questions. Some serious questions.
Kerfuffling.
Yes.
Yes. Because you don't even go down the line of taking samples, DNA samples from the hotel owner. If it makes it if his person is not a suspect in a matter. And so what you're doing with your DNA is to check to see whether that person came into contact with the body of the person. And so really and truly, they know what is likely to be, based on how they have handled the investigation, what is likely to be the results of that. So that is just to create a narrative, which I believe is quite dangerous. Listen, I joined with Mr. Slow. The police force is incapable of handling the investigation of this matter. Incapable. They cannot. From each and every step which has been mismanaged, each and every step of this investigation which has been mismanaged. I don't believe Guyana is serious about getting answers for this young girl's death without getting international help, because you want it to be independent, you want there to be an impartial investigation, and you want some sort of restoration of integrity of your investigation. The police force has lost it all. They have lost it all.
Dr. Todd, when we started this conversation close to 2 hours ago, Mr. Slow made the observation, and you did as well, that everyone having anything to do with that premises ought to have been detained and questioned.
Yes.
We learned in the process of the conversation that 3 police personnel had been placed under close arrest, and we don't know for what specifically and whether they remain under close arrest. What we also know is that the proprietor was taken into custody and has since been released and is required to visit the police station on a daily basis, pending the outcome of this investigation. We know these things, and we just learned that the president of this country has declared that there is no, the autopsy, he says, or the pathologists, he said, declared that the cause of death is drowning, and they ruled out the possibility of any forced drowning or other form of killing. So it seems to me as though the president has closed the case, and there may, in his opinion, be no further reason for the detention or questioning of anyone else. So where do we go now, Dr. Todd, as we wrap up?
I think I think Mr. Slow answered that really and truly you did not even have the commissioner or the crime chief coming out to hold a press conference and to give any sort of guidance in relation to where the stage in which this investigation is at. I am not sure who the investigator is or who leads this investigation. But by virtue of the fact that you have seen video footage of 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 policemen not properly dressed for a crime scene, there are questions in relation to part of a policeman's pants wet, etc. Now that police officer might have been doing his work, and I would want to give the police officer the benefit of the doubt to say he is able to be able to explain or to justify the status of his clothing. But if a police investigator wants to be thorough in this investigation, by virtue of the fact that none of the policemen or the first responders to the scene were not properly dressed, then all of their clothing should have been taken, bagged, and sent for analysis. All of their clothing. Because what you might not have gotten from the deceased's body by virtue of the fact that she was taken out of a pool, you might very well get something from another clothing which raises or which points to some further investigation. You see this thing about forensic and forensic examination or investigation is very, very thorough, and the science is very, very serious when it comes to investigation. And you rule no one out. You rule no one out. So all of their clothing and their footwear, everything should have been taken and sent for analysis because those were persons who came on the scene. Now, never you can come into contact with a body. It's just that we are accustomed in Guyana to this level of mediocrity that we are not holding the persons in authority accountable because the application of this science, is readily available in the world. And down to the poorest of countries in this world, they are using proper method of investigation. It really goes to the value, how we value life in this country. How we value life. Mr. Slow was correct when he said that this young's matter is not an isolated matter. It is a pattern of how we have been treating deaths in this country. That we are callous with the investigation. That we depend, and if you look at case laws and what is happening in the court, 90 or 85% of the cases are moving away from this what you call alleged I see witnesses, and they are moving to have the applied science to this matter, because forensic science cannot lie; it connects to you. And so this type of where what has happened in this term to this investigation and the fact that the place was burnt, yes, it might affect the extent of how you were able to traverse the crime scene, but it does not affect It does not affect a proper scoping, combing of and analyzing of that alleged crime scene. To this day, that place has not been cordoned off as a crime scene. To this day, no police has said no persons are barred from going there. You're seeing photographs left, right, and center all over social media are showing different position of the building and rooms and access and all of that. Absolutely nothing. How are they able to get that? That should have been revealed through or after the crime scene would have been properly analyzed and open to the public. So it just gives us the idea that the police force was not serious about a proper investigation of this matter. Could not be serious.
Mr. Slow, the final one for you here. We've been at this for a while.
Yes, we have been at it for a while. And let me say this, to support what Dr. Todd has said. In my training at the FBI Academy, they taught us there's this, what we call the Locard theory of transfer, which says that as you sit there now, Dr. Todd and Marv, when you get up from where you're sitting, elements, fibers from your clothing will be
Here from
transferred
your
to
head.
where you're sitting. And fibers from that chair or whatever you're sitting on will be transferred to your clothing. So it's a vice versa process. Your clothing is going to be transferred to the chair, and the chair elements or fibers from the chair is going to be transferred. The Locard theory of transfer. And they say that when you're doing a investigation of a crime scene, that is one of the things that you need to take into consideration. So you back those things for forensic analysis, and it might surprise you what type of evidence is revealed there. They never did that. In terms of the destruction or partial destruction of the building, evidence is still there. I made mention of the Oklahoma bombing when Timothy McVeigh loaded a vehicle with a rented vehicle, I think it was, with explosive and detonated in that building, bringing the whole building down. FBI combed through that and were able to find evidence linking McVeigh to this crime. He was tried, sentenced to death, and executed. I remind them too of the Lockerbie bombing. I think it was Panam 103, many, many years ago, where a terrorist bomb brought down that plane over Lockerbie, Scotland. They say in the training that this crime scene stretched through how many square miles? Square miles that crime scene stretched. And they searched and they searched and they searched the crime scene, and they were able to find a piece of an integrated circuit, no bigger than a fingernail. And from that, they were able to link where this bomb came from, all the way back, they link it to Libya. I'm saying this to emphasize that, look, even though you had all this damage, proper forensic examination might very well unearth evidence there, which will tell you who the perpetrator or perpetrators were.
But here's my
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
The recordings that they say camera not working, that too should have been seized. That would tell you when this thing stopped working. That would have supported whether what they were telling you is true or not. You seize the recorder, right? And you analyze the recorder. Even though they told you that, that might not have been so. But if you're investigating, you just don't accept what people tell you. That, look, this thing not working. You have got to investigate all of that. And that is why I continue to say that the police in Guyana do not have the capacity, do not have the experience, do not have the desire to get to the bottom of this investigation. They don't. They can't. And therefore, if you want something credible to be done, let's get the experts from overseas and let them do it. Only recently, the Attorney General and they're making statements about evidence in relation to the sanction, and that the things were handed over to the FBI in relation to people shot. Call them in and let them do a proper investigation. I am sure going through the right channels, I'm sure that can be facilitated. And if it's a question of cost, I'm sure the president made a statement that no cost will be
no
spared.
will be
No
spared.
resources will be spared to get to it. So stop the talking, walk the walk. No only talk the talk, walk the walk. And let me end by saying, I'm happy for this opportunity. I've had several opportunities to continue to come and to enlighten people and to share experience, my experience, and what we say. Again, I say everything that should have gone wrong, either deliberately or otherwise, went wrong. I'm talking about the police action, not only the police action, even the action of the government officials, right?
Well, I want to piggyback on your experience here. In the final question I wanted to ask you, you have some experience with political interference in the police force. You were the victim of political interference in the police force. Here's a case where the president, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has made a pronouncement on a matter. And we are here discussing how this investigation can be furthered and what are the best approaches, the employment of forensic science, and so on and so forth, and how best this could have been managed. But here is the president who has direct command of the police. In the absence of a statement from the crime chief or a press conference, in the absence of a press engagement by the commissioner of police, the president has spoken. And his conclusion is that based on the information he has, there's no forced drowning and there's no other form of killing. Do you sense that this, well, first the president said that others are making this thing political, but he has taken direct political control over the matter, the police, and every set of circumstance involved in this matter. Do you see this matter proceeding, given the president's position, given the government's apparent stance on the question of a second autopsy, and having regard to the fact that no one has yet been charged, and we still do not know the identity of the 3 police ranks who were reportedly under close arrest? Do you see this going anywhere?
Well, short answer. The president has spoken. There's what we call a dog whistle. So therefore, everything that is going to be done now, or every release made by the police, the Guyana police force, will tend to support what the president has said. None of them can get the backbone, even in the face of contradictory evidence, meaning evidence that contradicts what the president says. None of them will have the gumption, the backbone to come and to say, well, that is not so. If anything is to be clarified, the president himself will have to come and say maybe he misspoke and thing. And we know what happens, so it's not going to happen. The commissioner of police has not spoken in this matter. The crime chief has not spoken. So when the president and the vice president comes and make their pronouncements and so on, you believe they're going to come out, even if they have evidence to show otherwise, to say, well, look, the president was wrong? No, they're not going to do that. That is the dilemma that we are in. That is the dilemma. They're not going to come once the president makes that pronouncement. They all feel they have to, as we say in the military, fall in and cover down. That is what they feel that they have to do now.
This is why the commissioner of police, who was appointed after his valid employment date has expired, needs to go now. The president needs to follow suit by packing his suitcase, because the people of this country are fed up, and the only way for Guyana to grow is for the PPP to go. And that's all we have time for today on Nation Watch. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me and sharing the last 2 hours or so with me and the rest of the nation and further afield. To those our viewers and listeners, thank you for joining and staying with us. You've been here today in your thousands, and we thank you for staying with us. Until we meet again, God bless.